Guys, good morning. I don't know why we don't have a head coach yet, but we got some Kevin Durant trades to look at. And the Arizona Cardinals OTAs coming to a close. Will Johnson and Walter Nolen continue to impress. What does it mean if both guys are just downright awesome this year? Let's talk about it next.
The Ben Garcia Show. Yeah. Best show in the land. Yup. Listen. Come and get your information from Ben Garcia. Get the latest on your quarterback, running backs, and receivers. Tune in, so any other show you don't need them. Any news that he giving out, please just believe him. Giving out the latest prediction and top-notch analysis. Wanna hear the truth, better have thick skin like calluses. The latest move that your team just made can be damaging. The dudes ain't speaking no facts, they just be rambling. Lights, camera, action, turn on the show, go get the cameraman. Yeah. Lights, camera, action, turn on the show, go get the cameraman. The Ben Garcia Show.
What is up? Welcome into yet another edition of the Ben Garcia Show. Thank you so much for making me a part of your day, guys. Truly, I appreciate it. There are a lot of different platforms you can choose, but still, each and every day you choose the Ben Garcia Show. Follow me on all social media platforms at Ben Garcia Show. Tell me why you love me. Tell me why you hate me. I am on all social media platforms, as well as don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this channel because it ultimately helps me out more than you will ever know. All right, there's a lot of things to get to, so let's just talk about it. Let's kind of free flow style it this morning. A lot of different things we could go towards, a lot of different avenues. So let's start here. The Phoenix Suns have, according to John Gambadoro, have had some exploratory talks with the San Antonio Spurs about a potential deal. And before I hit that, there was a report that came out last night from one of my colleagues, or I don't want to make it seem like we're best friends, but we both work at the Locked On Podcast Network. And he likes to drop some of the things that he's hearing when it comes to the Phoenix Suns and Kevin Durant trade rumors. Sorry about that. Dropped my pen this morning. But he was mentioning how yesterday the Phoenix Suns are looking for a center. That would be one of the things they're prioritizing when it comes in any Kevin Durant trade. And to some extent, I get it. I do understand where the Phoenix Suns are coming from. This team needs a center. This team hasn't had a solid center since DeAndre Ayton. They haven't had an elite center since DeAndre Ayton the finals year. The next season, again, DeAndre Ayton revisionist history. People just want to remember the good times. He was so spotty, so up and down. Devin Booker didn't get along with him. Kevin Durant didn't like him. It's widely reported that both those guys wanted him gone because he didn't take the game seriously. And you look over at the Portland Trail Blazers, and they went and drafted his replacement in Donovan Clingan last year. So they don't love him either. So DeAndre Ayton, there's a chance that the Phoenix Suns have a chance at going after a center in any Kevin Durant trade. And immediately people point the finger towards, well, makes it really easy if it's Rudy Gobert or a Karl-Anthony Towns. And before we talk about what the Spurs trade could be, which I think could be very interesting, and as my guy Aaron in the chat tries to sell off Brook Lopez to us, here's an idea. We'll take Bradley, or you guys take Bradley Beal, we'll take Brook Lopez. Let's just settle it there. But when you talk about someone like Karl-Anthony Towns, it would make no sense to bring him here if you're the Phoenix Suns. I'm not even sure how badly Devin Booker would want Karl-Anthony Towns here. I know they're friends. I know they played together at Kentucky, but that was almost a decade ago, guys. At some point, you kind of move on. I don't know how close those two, I'm assuming, still are. They live on opposite sides of the country at this point. At one point, he lived halfway across the country from Devin Booker. So I think it would be a little foolish to bring Karl-Anthony Towns here for multiple reasons, and I mentioned this before. Horrific defender, bad contract. I already have one of those guys in Bradley Beal. It just doesn't make any sense to bring in a Karl-Anthony Towns who wouldn't make any sense here. He doesn't fit here. The Phoenix Suns have often talked about the next version of the Suns teams, and what we can allude to are those are teams that are tough, bring a presence, physical, and defensive-minded. Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't fit any of that. He's a good offensive center, scores, microwave some buckets, can get hot at times. I know he's dropped like 60 in a game before, but it wouldn't make that much sense. And same moves over to the Rudy Gobert side of things. Why would the Phoenix Suns want Rudy Gobert? Yes, he brings a defensive aspect, but he's already starting to hit the back nine of his career. If I'm not mistaken, Rudy Gobert is no longer like an old guy, but he's 32 years old. He's reaching towards the tail end of his prime. If you're talking about the NBA, that is like the end of your prime. 28 to 32 is like your prime years. So he's starting to go down the opposite direction. He's a lob threat. He's a defender, but he's older. He's on a super max contract. And I don't know if someone like that has the same competitive spirit as someone like Devin Booker. I just don't know if those two would mesh incredibly well. So when it comes towards bringing a center here, great. But if it's not a Khalil Ware, if it's not a Derek Lively, I'm just not interested. I need someone who can help me win now, somewhat young, and can protect the basket better than DeAndre Ayton did when he was here. So when you talk about, and maybe you don't even get that, and that's totally fine. But let's move it over to the San Antonio Spurs talk. Yesterday, John Gambadoro reported that the Suns have had some talks with the San Antonio Spurs about potentially a trade for Kevin Durant. A trade I'd be really interested in, and I think would be really good for both sides. And I've talked about this before on Locked On Suns, but not here. The Spurs, I'm not really sure why they would go after a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. It doesn't make a ton of sense, especially for a team that's got a ton of young players and has got a plethora of picks. They don't want to push all those in to the middle of the table right away, especially for a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's really ball dominant. I'm not so sure if that's going to work out super well with Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, who's super ball dominant. Kevin Durant fits everywhere. He's a mid-range assassin. He could shoot the three ball really well. He can get to the rim, but he doesn't do it as much as he used to because he's trying to protect his body, which is totally fair at his age. But if you can get the second of the two first-round picks from the San Antonio Spurs that they got from the Atlanta Hawks, if you can get that 12th overall pick or 14th overall pick, I'm not exactly sure which pick that would be. I'm pretty sure it's 14th, but I would have to check for you guys really quickly. But either way, that draft pick, and then as well get Jeremy Sohan and Devin Vassell. Yeah, it'd be the 14th overall pick. So if you're the Phoenix Suns, if you could get a trade, and I've ran this through the trade machine before, it works perfectly fine without cutting anyone. If you get the 14th overall pick, Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, that is all the salary you need. And if you're the San Antonio Spurs, you're not losing anyone that's going to gut your roster tremendously. And if you're the Suns, you get someone in Harrison Barnes that can shoot a three. You get Devin Vassell, a younger, athletic player who's got a ceiling to him but can help you win now. Jeremy Sohan, who just gets along with Devin Booker super well, but a defensive-minded guy, bit of a high flyer. And the 14th overall pick to go get another young player, that satisfies my needs. It's not my favorite Kevin Durant trade. But instead of going and getting a Karl-Anthony Towns or a Rudy Gobert, I'd much rather have the 14th overall pick to use that pick for what I want to use it for. Maybe I go get a center. Maybe I don't. Maybe I go get a Maxime Reynaud. Maybe. Maybe I don't decide I don't want to do that. Maybe I go get a wing. Like, I don't like being hamstrung by getting a player like Karl-Anthony Towns, who's just a bigger Bradley Beal, obviously a better player, but he doesn't play any defense, and he's on a really bad contract. And same with Rudy Gobert. I don't really want to go down that route. A guy who's older on a massive deal, maybe you could get Rudy Gobert, Rob Dillingham, and a first-round pick. Maybe that entices you to do that. And then same with the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. The only way I do that deal is if I get Tyler Kolek, Karl-Anthony Towns, and 3 first-round picks. Because then you're incentivizing me for taking on that bad deal with those picks. And I also just like Tyler Kolek a little bit from the draft last year. Rudy Gobert, Rob Dillingham, him, maybe a pick or two. Because Rob Dillingham was such a high pick last year, you probably don't get as much. Sure, you're incentivizing me to take those deals. But what if I don't have to do that? What if I go over to the San Antonio Spurs and I get Devin Vassell, a good two-way player that can help me win now, Jeremy Sohan, a little bit of a high flyer, a defensive presence, the 14th overall pick to do what I want to do with the pick. Maybe I go get a forward, maybe I go get a center, and it gives me a chance to draft my next star. And then as well as Harrison Barnes, a veteran presence that can shoot the three ball, again, helping you stay competitive now. It's one of my favorite offers. Sure, I like the Heat's deal with Khalil Ware potentially. I like Derek Lively from the Mavericks. But if I'm being honest, the Spurs deal checks a lot of boxes. And just getting a center to help me win now, especially Karl-Anthony Towns, he's been to two conference finals with two teams, but both teams after making those conference finals are looking to ship him out. I'm just not interested in that. And I don't think he fits super well with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. They could score 200 points a night and still lose because defensively, it's just not going to work out for that team. But ultimately, you're talking about a deal. I really like the Spurs one. I'm not interested in bringing in a high-level center here to win the press conference, to appease Devin Booker, I guess, a little bit, but be one of the worst defensive teams or get a defensive center like Rudy Gobert and break down immediately as soon as I get him, especially with both those guys on massive deals. I like the aggressiveness, but let's be smart here. There's a way to get players to help you win now, and there's a way to get that as well as a pick. And the San Antonio Spurs do that. All right, guys. I don't know what it is this morning. I'm just up and at it this morning. So let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Let's talk about it while I'm on a roll here. I feel like I'm just making good point after good point. So OTAs are wrapping up for the Arizona Cardinals. And all anyone can talk about is how good both of these rookies look. Walter Nolen, some contract disputes. Apparently, Jonathan Gannon flushed out down the toilet yesterday saying that's not why he wasn't practicing or fully practicing with the Arizona Cardinals at OTAs. Listen, you don't have to disclose anything at this point, so maybe he had twisted an ankle. I don't see it as that big of a deal. It's not like it's Shamar Stewart, who still isn't practicing, who's got as many holdouts as he has contract disputes in the last couple of years. Has as many holdouts as he does sacks over the last couple of years. So there's that issue with Shamar Stewart. I don't see that here with Walter Nolen. And then yesterday, he's back at practice, full go. And man, you can't feel anything. I love Will Johnson. But I am the person who tends to be a little bit of a contrarian. I like to run to the other side when everyone else is going to the other side. I just have always been that way in terms of, well, that's really cool, but everyone's over there. What about this over here? This is pretty cool too. And yesterday there was a picture put out, and I can't remember who it was by. I think it was my guy Bo Brock of PHNX Cardinals, who does amazing work. Him and Johnny Venerable, both friends of mine. He put out a picture of Walter Nolen and Darius Robinson yesterday. And he put out something like the future of the interior of the Cardinals defensive line. And you're like, whew. What a way to spend a couple of first-round picks. Walter Nolen in the middle. Darius Robinson, who's a little bit more versatile, but probably will play more in the middle than he does the edge. And you're like, I just feel safe in those guys' arms. And you look at the defensive line as a whole. I'm not sure how much they're going to play together at the same time because of how good this defensive line is now. I know people mention how old Calais Campbell is. Well, he's still a run stuffer, and it doesn't matter how old you get. You're going to be able to put your hands up in the air and bat some balls down. It's one of the things I really love about Calais Campbell. And then same as well with Dalvin Tomlinson. Two just beefy guys in the middle of that defensive line. And what I love about this Cardinals defensive line and why it was so great to add a rookie to that and to hear how great it is that this rookie is performing as well as he is at OTAs. And just so we're clear, you can see that. But I'll get to that in just a second. The fact that this Cardinals defensive line, they can just keep rotating players in. Like, we know it's not going to be a top 5 defensive line. Maybe it is. Maybe Jonathan Gannon's working some just devil's magic behind the scenes and is just making chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. But it's going to be a top 15 defensive line, which the Cardinals had a bottom defensive line last year. If they just have a top half of a defensive line, they probably make the playoffs next year. But what I like about this Cardinals defense, and I've mentioned this before, is that they can just continue rotating out players. Rotating them out, each and every player. They don't have a ton of different guys that can get to the quarterback at will easily. But they can just throw good defensive lineman after good defensive lineman. When one of those guys gets tired, they just rotate him out. That's how many bodies they have, and they didn't have that last year. And the Buffalo Bills have been doing this for the past couple seasons. They don't have any elite level edge rushers, but they've got like 6 or 7 dudes that they can keep rotating out, keep fresh, and it puts the offensive line back on their heels. And when you talk about Walter Nolen playing well at OTAs, and we'll talk about Will Johnson in just a second, it's very easy to tell when someone looks lost. I've been to these things. I will be out at training camp. Just didn't have the time to get out to OTAs. It's very difficult to do so. It's basically on the other side of the earth from me, as well as trying to find a regular 9-to-5 job. It's probably not best to spend all my time out there. You can tell who looks lost and who doesn't. Last year, it was very easy to tell. Josh Dobbs, Desmond Ridder, terrible. Not Josh Dobbs. Desmond Ridder, Clayton Tune, terrible. Just terrible quarterbacks. Or you were like, Trey Benson looks a little lost. And then he figured it out late in the season, but he did look lost at first. And then you were like, oh, Darius Robinson looks awesome. And then he gets injured. So you can tell these things. It's not super difficult. My guy in the chat also about Pro Football Focus quarterback rankings. Unlike Johnny V, we all know that Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are better than any of the quarterbacks we have. No, the defensive line for Philly didn't give them a benefit. I really like Johnny Venerable. I really respect the dude's opinion. I think he's a really good dude. I think he does a really good job. I would disagree if he did say that. I would say Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are probably better than what the Cardinals have right now. But that's because one player has film and the other one doesn't. So, Aaron, appreciate your comment. I would just continue to say, it's easy to tell. When the media is telling you and hyping up someone at OTAs, it's not super hard to tell who looks confused and who looks awesome, who's been studying the playbook and who isn't. And it just feels like, as well with Walter Nolen, Will Johnson just feels like a Tyrann Mathieu type of player. He feels like someone, not in the same, obviously, mold, but Tyrann Mathieu fell in the draft for what is widely seen as pretty dumbish reasons. He was kicked out of school for weed. Do what you want with your life, but it's not like the worst thing you can do if we're just being honest. And Will Johnson kind of feels like that too. Fell in the draft for God knows what reason. A knee injury that from everyone else looks really good at OTAs. And you're telling yourself now, if you have if both rookies perform well, they don't have to be Defensive Rookie of the Year candidates, but if both guys perform well, you're talking about plugging up 2 major holes in one draft. And then next year you're talking about, well, what do the Cardinals really have to fix? Maybe it's the quarterback, maybe, but I don't want to go down that route. But you're talking about potentially adding another wide receiver, going after a big name running back. This is where luxury picks come into play. And so when you're talking about that, you're like, man, the Cardinals really might have just hit 2 homers in one draft. And call what it is. They had 2 first-round picks. One guy just fell in the draft incredibly far, and no one could really understand why. And so you're talking about it now, and you're like, I love Will Johnson. I think he has a really low bust potential, when you're talking about Walter Nolen or Will Johnson, I think Walter Nolen has a bigger chance to fail because defensive tackle is just incredibly difficult, and it's not really based off athleticism. It's based off of strength, technique. Cornerback, a lot of it's based off of athleticism. And I think Will Johnson's just got insane athleticism as well as footwork. There's those things that come onto it as well. You can't just rely solely on athleticism. But man, you're talking about a defense now that has 2 potential defensive rookie of the year candidates, a potential shutdown corner, a potential run stuffer in the middle of that defensive line. And you're like, man, congrats to Monty. This is a defense that could be scary next year. And those 2 guys, hearing about how well that they're playing, you're like, could both guys be in the running for defensive rookie of the year? And if that's the case, you're talking about hitting 2 home runs in 1 draft, and that just doesn't come around very often. I mean, credit to Monty Austin for it. If Will Johnson doesn't work out, he was worth the risk. You're not going after him for that. Whereas other general managers, too scared to take a risk. This was the risk that I wanted to see Monty Austin for take in the draft. Stop playing checkers. Play a little bit of chess. Be a little spontaneous. And you talk about a guy who I'm hearing and I'm texting people and they're like, he looks awesome. And I'm like, of course he does. Of course he does. 2 players who don't have their contracts signed, by the way, right now. Both are participating in camp. The Cardinals are going to continue to get high-level people in this organization. They're going to continue to get smart players that care about each other. They don't just want talent. They're going to continue to get dudes that love football and love being a part of a team. I mean, Keim for years would just draft off talent and, dudes like David Johnson from Northern Iowa. What I love about this team is they go and get dudes that love football, put the team first, and they know that they're going to get taken care of, and that's where the Cardinals come into play. But how could you... I didn't have a super big of a plan like where I want to go with this, but how could you not get excited? And recently some of the things I've been talking about can be seen as negative. And you just continue to point out the right things with this defense and what they decided to do with their picks, and you're like, man, this defense, it's going to be top 10, man. It's going to be a top 10 defense. You trust Nick Rallis, you trust Jonathan Gannon, you give him a couple of new tools to play with, and you're like, man, it's going to be a really fun year. It might not be Super Bowl. It might not be conference championship game. But could you win a playoff game? And that could be a ton of fun. And then the next year, we'll talk about where they could go from there. But as of right now, the future of the Cardinals looks really bright. All right, guys. Thank you so much for making me a part of your day. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, potentially even tell a friend about the Ben Garcia Show. We are live every day at 7 a.m., 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'll never broadcast later in terms of starting the show past 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So appreciate you guys making me a part of your day. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, potentially tell a friend, as well as follow me on all social media platforms at Ben Garcia Show. Interact with me there. I love talking with you guys on there. And so until tomorrow, I'm Benjamin Garcia, and it's been the Ben Garcia Show.